Armin had dreamed of owning his own home for years. He worked long hours, saved every bit he could, and finally found a small house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It was not a big house, but it had a small garden, a sunny porch, and a peaceful view. To Armin, it was perfect. He moved in on a bright Saturday morning. The sky was clear and birds were singing. His car was full of boxes, bags, and a few old pieces of furniture. He smiled as he parked in front of his new house. He looked at the nameplate on the gate and read his address again. It felt special to see his name attached to a real home. Armin stepped out of his car and took a slow, deep breath. The fresh air felt like the start of a new life. He walked to the front door with his house key in hand. The key had been given to him by the real estate agent after weeks of paperwork and careful planning. Just as he placed the key into the lock, he heard a voice behind him. A sharp voice that made him pause. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Armin turned around slowly. A woman was standing across the street. She wore big sunglasses, even though the sun was not that strong. Her hair was curled neatly, and she held a phone in her hand as if ready to call someone. She looked serious, almost angry. Armin smiled politely. "Good morning. I'm moving in." "This is my house," the woman frowned. "Your house? That can't be right. This is part of Oakwood HOA. We have rules about who can move here and how things are done. You can't just walk in like that." Armin looked at her with confusion. "I think there's a misunderstanding. My house is not part of the HOA. The real estate agent told me that this side of the street is outside the association. My house number is listed under a non-HOA area." The woman crossed her arms. "That's impossible. Every home here follows HOA rules. You can't just claim otherwise. Do you even live around here?" Armin tried to keep his voice calm and friendly. "No, I just bought this place last week. I have all the documents if you'd like to see them." But the woman didn't seem interested. She looked at him up and down, then at his car. Her expression changed to one of suspicion. "You don't look like someone who lives here. That car doesn't belong on this street. Are you sure you're not trying to break in?" Armin blinked. "Break in? No, ma'am. I just told you this is my home." The woman shook her head and took a step back. "Don't lie to me. I've lived here for 15 years. I know every house and every owner. I've never seen you before." "This looks very suspicious," Armin sighed. "My name is Armin. The previous owner was Mr. Dale. He sold me the house." For a moment, the woman looked uncertain, but then her face tightened again. "Mr. Dale sold his house? No one told the HOA. That's not how things work here. You can't move in without approval." Armin gave a small smile. "Maybe that applies to other homes, but this one isn't managed by your HOA. It's technically outside your community boundary." The agent showed me the map. The woman's face turned red. "Don't talk nonsense. I'll call the police right now." "You're trespassing." Armin raised his hand slightly in surprise. "Please, there's no need for that. I can show you the purchase papers right now." But she had already taken out her phone and started dialing. "Yes, there's someone trying to break into a house on Maple Street. He's pretending it's his, but I know it's not. You should send someone quickly." Armin stood quietly. He didn't want to argue. He just wanted to move into his new home peacefully. A few neighbors peeked through their curtains, watching the scene unfold. Armin felt embarrassed but kept his patience. He waited silently while she talked on the phone. When she finished, she glared at him again. "The police are coming. Let's see what they say when they arrive." Armin nodded. "That's fine. I have nothing to hide." He turned back to the door, placed his key in the lock again, and gently turned it. The door opened smoothly. He smiled to himself, feeling a mix of pride and relief. The woman gasped loudly. "I saw that. You forced the door open. You broke the lock?" Armin shook his head calmly. "No, ma'am. The key fits because this is my home. I didn't break anything." The woman started recording on her phone. "I have proof now. He won't get away with this." Armin sighed again. He picked up one of his boxes and carried it inside. The living room was empty but full of light. It smelled of fresh paint. He placed the box on the floor and looked around. He imagined how it would look once everything was in place. This was his new beginning, and he was not going to let this strange encounter ruin it. After about 15 minutes, a police car arrived. 2 officers stepped out. The woman ran toward them as if she had been waiting all her life for this moment. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she said quickly. "This man broke into that house. He's pretending to be the owner, but he's not." "I saw him open the lock myself," one of the officers nodded patiently. All right, ma'am. Please calm down. Let's find out what's going on. The second officer walked up to Armin. Good morning, sir. Can we see some identification and documents for the property? Of course, Armin said. He pulled out a folder from one of his boxes and handed it over. The officer checked it carefully. The name matched Armand's ID. The registration date was recent, but everything was in proper order. The officer turned to the woman. Ma'am, this property belongs to him. It's legally registered under his name. Also, this area is not part of the HOA. The boundary line ends 2 houses before this one. The woman looked stunned. That can't be. Everyone here follows HOA rules. He must be mistaken. The officer pointed toward the wooden sign near the road. It says right there, end of HOA jurisdiction. This property is private. He doesn't need any HOA approval. The woman looked at the sign as if seeing it for the first time. Her confident face changed into confusion. I didn't know that. Nobody told me. Armin smiled politely. It's all right, ma'am. It's an easy mistake, the first officer nodded. Everything seems fine here. No one broke in. He's just moving into his new home. The woman tried to speak but stopped. Well, this neighborhood has standards. I hope he keeps the place clean. The officer gave a small smile. I'm sure he will. When the police left, the woman stood there for a moment, embarrassed but still trying to hold on to her pride. Just remember, people around here care about appearances, she said before walking away. Armand watched her leave and then looked back at his house. He felt a mix of amusement and relief. He was glad the officers cleared things up. But deep inside, he had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time she caused trouble. He closed the door behind him and looked around again. The sunlight filled the room, and for the first time that day, he felt truly at peace. This house was his, and he was ready to start a new chapter of his life. What he didn't know was that the days ahead would bring more strange encounters with his overly curious neighbor, who was not ready to let him live quietly just yet. The next morning, Armin woke up early. It was his first full day in his new home, and he wanted to make the most of it. The morning light filled the small bedroom through the half-open curtains. Everything still looked new and exciting to him. The walls were empty, the rooms were quiet, and his furniture was still in boxes, but the house already felt like his own space. He made himself a cup of tea and stood near the front window looking at the neighborhood. The street was calm. A few people were walking their dogs, and a delivery truck stopped at a house nearby. Armin smiled, thinking maybe yesterday's drama was just a one-time misunderstanding. He wanted to believe things would be peaceful from now on. After finishing his tea, he stepped outside to sweep the porch and arrange a few flower pots near the front steps. Gardening had always been his hobby, and he wanted to decorate the small space with color. He placed a few bright red pots and began planting small green plants he had brought along. Just when he was enjoying the calm, he heard a familiar voice again. What do you think you're doing? Armin turned around slowly. It was the same woman from yesterday, the one who had called the police. She was walking toward him with a notebook in her hand and a serious look on her face. Good morning, ma'am, Armin said politely. I'm just planting some flowers. It's a nice day, so I thought I'd work outside. The woman frowned. That's not the correct color for pots. We only allow brown or gray planters in this neighborhood. Red is not on the approved list. Armand blinked. Approved list? I didn't know there was one. Anyway, this is not an HOA property, so I can use any color I like. The woman narrowed her eyes. You may think that, but this street follows community standards. Even if your house is technically outside the HOA, we all try to keep the area uniform. Red pots ruin the look. Armin smiled kindly. I understand you want the neighborhood to look nice, but I really like these colors. I think they make the place cheerful. The woman sighed and shook her head. You're new, so maybe you don't understand how things work around here. My name is Karen. I'm the head of the Oakwood Neighborhood Committee. Even if your house is not in the HOA, I take care of the street. You'll need to follow certain guidelines. Armand looked a little puzzled. Guidelines? From a committee that doesn't manage my property? Karen nodded proudly. Yes, everyone here respects the rules. It's about community spirit. Armand tried to stay patient. I appreciate that, but I think I'll stick to my own style. I bought this house because I liked its freedom. I'll make sure it stays clean and neat, but I'll decorate it my way. Karen crossed her arms. If you don't listen, you'll make people upset. We all like things to match. I already spoke to a few neighbors and they agree with me. Armand stayed calm. That's fine. I'll talk to them myself. I'm sure they won't mind some red pots. Karen gave him a long stare, then turned around. "We'll see about that," she said, and walked off briskly. Armin sighed with a small smile. He didn't want any trouble. He just wanted to enjoy his home. He continued arranging the plants, humming softly to himself. By noon, he decided to visit a local hardware store to buy a few tools and cleaning supplies. When he returned, he noticed something strange. A piece of paper was taped to his door. It had a heading that read "Notice of Violation." Armin read it twice in disbelief. It listed 3 supposed violations: unapproved color of planters, non-standard doormat design, vehicle parked facing the wrong direction. At the bottom, it said, "Issued by Oakwood, HOA." Armin laughed softly. It was so strange that someone from the HOA would issue a notice to him when his home was not even under their control. He took the paper off the door and went inside. Later in the afternoon, he saw Karen again. She was standing near her mailbox, pretending to check her letters, but clearly watching him. Armin walked over politely. "Ma'am, I found this notice on my door," he said, holding the paper. "I think there's been a mistake. My home is outside the HOA area, so this doesn't apply to me." Karen looked at the paper and smiled in a proud, satisfied way. "Oh, that's not a mistake. I left that notice. Even if your house is outside the line, it still affects the view from our side. So I made an exception." Armin tried not to laugh. "I appreciate your effort, but you can't issue official HOA papers to non-members." "That's not how it works," Karen frowned. "You don't have to be rude. I'm just trying to keep our area beautiful." Armin's voice remained calm. "I understand, but please stop leaving notices on my door. It makes me look like I've done something wrong, and I haven't. I just moved in, and I want good relations with neighbors." Karen looked at him for a few seconds, then said in a cold voice, "Fine, but if you want to fit in, you'll need to adjust. People here don't like when someone breaks tradition." Armin nodded slightly. "Thank you for your concern. Have a good day." He turned back toward his house and decided not to argue further. He knew some people liked control and rules even when those rules didn't apply. The rest of the week was quiet at first. Armin painted one of his bedroom walls, fixed a few pipes, and arranged his furniture. Every morning he took care of his plants, and every evening he took a short walk around the block. Most neighbors smiled at him when he greeted them. Some even came over to say hello. They seemed nice and friendly. One evening, a man named Sam stopped by while walking his dog. He smiled warmly. "You must be the new guy." "I'm Sam from down the street." Armin smiled back. "Yes, I'm Armin. Nice to meet you." Sam looked around and lowered his voice slightly. "So how's it going with Karen?" "She loves rules. She's always trying to control everyone." Armin chuckled lightly. "Yes, I've noticed. She's been giving me some advice about decorations." Sam laughed. "Advice?" "She tried to tell me my curtains were the wrong color." "Don't worry about her. You're outside her area, so she can't do anything official." Armin felt relieved hearing that. "That's good to know. I just want peace," Sam nodded. "You'll be fine. Just ignore her. She gets bored and looks for things to complain about." They talked for a few more minutes, then Sam waved goodbye. Armin went back inside feeling a little better. At least not everyone in the area was like Karen. The next morning, however, Armin noticed something new. His red flower pots had been moved. They were no longer in a neat row. Someone had placed them all in a corner near the fence. A small note was left beside them. It said, "Wrong color. Please remove." Armin looked around, but no one was outside. He sighed and placed the pots back where they belonged. He did not want to accuse anyone, but it was clear who might have done it. That night, he sat on his porch with a cup of tea, thinking quietly. He still loved his new home, but he was starting to realize that peace might not come easily. He looked up at the sky, full of stars, and told himself to stay patient. He would handle things calmly, no matter how many strange rules or notes appeared. He had worked too hard for this house to let someone spoil the joy of it. He had no idea that Karen's next plan would be much more dramatic. A few days passed, and Armin tried his best to stay calm and polite. He focused on fixing up his home, painting walls, and making the small garden look fresh and green. Every time he stepped outside, he hoped the street would stay quiet and peaceful. But peace was something Karen didn't seem to understand. Karen had started what she called her neighborhood watch program. Every morning, she walked up and down the street with a small notebook in her hand. She took notes about people's lawns, garbage bins, mailboxes, and even how long visitors' cars stayed parked. Some neighbors ignored her, while others pretended to agree with her just to avoid trouble. Armin noticed her from his window almost every day. She would stop near his house, look at his flower pots, and shake her head disapprovingly. Sometimes she would even take pictures. Armin didn't say anything. He just let her do what she wanted, hoping she would get tired eventually. One morning, Armin decided to build a small wooden fence around his garden. It wasn't big or fancy, just a few wooden planks to mark the edge of his yard. He enjoyed small projects like that, and it made the garden look neat. As he worked, he heard footsteps approaching. Karen was standing near the sidewalk again. She crossed her arms and watched him carefully. "You are putting up a fence," she said. Armin nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. Just a small one to keep the garden tidy." She frowned. "That type of fence is not approved by the HOA. The height and color are both incorrect." Armin smiled patiently. "This house is not part of the HOA. I checked again with the city office. The property boundary is outside your association." Karen looked at him with disbelief. "That doesn't mean you can build anything you want. It will ruin the view for everyone else, and your fence color doesn't match the others." Armin kept his voice calm. "I'm sorry if it bothers you, but it's within my property line and follows local regulations." "I made sure it's all allowed." Karen shook her head. "You may think you can do whatever you want, but people here care about appearances. You should show respect for the neighborhood." Armin looked at her kindly. "I respect the neighborhood, ma'am. I just don't follow HOA rules because they don't apply here." Karen's face turned serious. "We'll see about that. I'll talk to the city inspector. You'll have to remove that fence." Armin didn't respond. He simply went back to his work, gently nailing the wooden planks. He didn't want to argue. He knew the city wouldn't stop him because everything he had built followed the law. Later that afternoon, he saw Karen walking with two other people, both holding clipboards. They stopped near his house again and pointed at different things: the pots, the fence, and even his porch light. Armin watched from his window, shaking his head slightly. It looked like a small inspection team had arrived. A few minutes later, Karen knocked on his door. Armin opened it, still smiling. "Good afternoon," she said. "This is Mr. Paul and Mrs. Green. They are part of the Oakwood HOA committee. We're here to review your property appearance and suggest corrections." Armin replied politely, "Thank you for visiting, but my home is not part of Oakwood HOA, so there's nothing to review." Karen looked firm. "We still have the right to make recommendations for the area." "We like things to be consistent," Armin nodded. "I understand, but I prefer to make my own choices for my home." Mrs. Green tried to speak softly. "It's just a friendly visit. Maybe you can consider repainting your fence to a lighter shade. It would look more uniform." Armin smiled. "Thank you for the suggestion. I'll think about it." Karen didn't look pleased. She muttered something under her breath and turned to leave. Before walking away, she said loudly, "You'll thank me later when your house looks like it belongs here." After they left, Armin sat down on his porch. He could not believe how much time Karen spent trying to control others. He didn't feel angry, but he started to feel a bit tired of all this. He just wanted a simple, quiet life. That evening, Sam passed by again with his dog. "Hey, Armin, I saw the committee in front of your house today." "Did they bother you?" Armin laughed lightly. "They came to suggest changes to my house color and fence. I told them it's not their area." Sam shook his head. "She never gives up. A few months ago, she argued with a family down the street because they parked their car too close to her mailbox. She even measured the distance with a ruler." Armin smiled. "I guess she likes order," Sam chuckled. "Order, yes, but too much of it. Don't worry, most people here think she goes too far. You'll get used to it." The next day, Armin decided to visit the city office just to make sure all his property documents were correct. He wanted to be ready in case Karen tried anything new. The city clerk confirmed everything. His house was clearly marked outside the HOA line. He even got a printed map showing the border. When Armin returned home, he placed the map in a folder. He hoped he wouldn't need it, but it felt good to have proof. That evening, while he was watering his plants, he noticed Karen talking to a few neighbors again. She was pointing at his house, speaking in a serious tone. Armin didn't hear the words, but he could guess what she was saying. He decided not to react. The next morning, he found another note on his door. This time it read Community Petition, Request for Property Compliance. There were a few signatures from people on the street. Armin smiled as he read it. Most of the names were the same few who always agreed with Karen. He folded the paper and placed it on his table. Later, he saw Sam and showed it to him. Sam laughed so hard he could hardly speak. A petition for compliance? That's new even for her. Don't sign anything. Just let her waste her paper. Armin nodded. I won't sign anything. I'll stay polite but firm. That afternoon, he decided to bake some cookies and take them to the friendly neighbors who had welcomed him earlier. He thought maybe kindness would balance out the tension. People smiled when he visited. One family even invited him for tea. They told him not to worry about Karen and that most people respected his calm nature. By the time Armin came home, he felt lighter. He realized he had support. Not everyone agreed with Karen's rules. But that night, when the street became quiet, Armin heard a sound outside. He opened his curtain slightly and saw a flashlight moving near his fence. It was Karen holding her notebook again. She was inspecting his property at night, writing things down. Armin sighed and stepped outside calmly. Good evening, ma'am. Is everything all right? Karen jumped a little and quickly put her notebook behind her back. Oh, I was just checking the lighting around your fence. Some of it reflects too brightly on the road. It could disturb drivers. Armin looked around. The road was empty. There are no drivers at this hour. Maybe you should rest, ma'am. It's late. Karen straightened her back. I'm doing this for safety. I care about this street. Armin gave her a gentle smile. I understand, but please don't enter my property without permission. If there's any problem, we can talk during the day. Karen hesitated, then nodded quickly and walked away. Armin went back inside, shaking his head with a small smile. He admired her dedication but wished she would use her energy for something better. He closed the door and sat down, thinking about how unusual his new neighborhood had turned out to be. He still loved his home, but he knew one thing for sure now. Life next to Karen would never be boring. And he had a feeling her next move would be even more surprising. The next morning, Rayan woke up early with a clear plan in his mind. He had spent the entire night thinking about the situation with Mrs. Karen. He realized that she was not just being annoying for no reason. Something deeper must be bothering her. Maybe she had been in control for so long that she could not stand anyone who did not follow her rules. Still, Rayan knew he needed to stand up for himself. He decided that this day would bring some answers. When he stepped outside, the air was calm. The sky was bright and the neighborhood looked peaceful. But Rayan knew that behind those quiet streets a storm of gossip had started. People were whispering about the new guy who had moved into the non-HOA house and caused a scene. He saw two ladies walking their dogs stop talking when they noticed him. They both smiled politely but looked away quickly. Rayan took a deep breath and told himself not to care. He had nothing to hide. As Rayan was watering the small plants near his porch, he saw Mr. Green walking over. The old man waved and smiled. Morning, young man. I saw what happened yesterday. Don't let it get to you. She has been like that for years. Rayan smiled back. I'm trying not to, but it's hard when everyone looks at me like I did something wrong. Mr. Green nodded. That's how she makes people feel. She likes to be in charge. But don't worry, son, you're not alone. You just need to show people who you really are. When they see you're a good man, they'll stop believing her. That small talk gave Rayan a bit of confidence. After Mr. Green left, Rayan made a decision. He went to the local store and bought some cookies, lemonade, and paper cups. Then he made a sign that said, Welcome Gathering, Non-HOA Home Neighbor. He placed it in front of his house and hoped that maybe a few curious neighbors would come and see for themselves that he was not a problem. By late afternoon, people began walking by, reading the sign. Some smiled, others looked unsure. Rayan stood outside, greeting everyone politely. Hi there, I'm Rayan. I just moved in last week. I thought it would be nice to meet everyone. One woman named Lisa came over first. She said, Oh, you're the one Mrs. Karen was talking about. She said you moved into a house that doesn't follow rules. Rayan laughed softly. That's true. My house isn't part of the HOA. But I plan to keep it clean and friendly just like everyone else. Lisa looked around and smiled. I think that's fair. Honestly, I never liked how strict she was. She once told me what color my door should be. As time passed, more neighbors came. They shared small stories about how Karen had scolded them for small things. One person said she complained because their car had dust on it. Another said she once argued about garden decorations. Everyone laughed and relaxed together. Rayan was happy to see that people were finally seeing the real picture. But just as things started feeling light and friendly, a familiar voice shouted from down the street. What is going on here? It was Karen. She was wearing a formal outfit as if she was attending a meeting. Her face looked shocked and angry. Everyone went quiet. She walked straight to Rayon's house and crossed her arms. You cannot host public gatherings without HOA permission. Rayan looked calm. This is not an HOA event, Mrs. Karen. My property is outside the association, remember? I'm just having some lemonade with neighbors. Karen's face turned red. You're disturbing the peace. This is not how things are done here. You think you can make friends and turn them against me? Before Rayan could respond, Lisa stepped forward. Mrs. Karen, please, we're just talking. No one is doing anything wrong. You've been making people nervous for too long. Maybe it's time we enjoy the neighborhood without fear. The crowd nodded in agreement. Karen looked around and saw that almost everyone stood beside Rayan. She seemed speechless for a moment. Her confidence faded as she realized that the people she had tried to control were no longer afraid of her. Karen took a step back, holding her bag tightly. You're all making a mistake. I only wanted to protect this community, Rayan spoke softly, then protect it with kindness. No one wants to fight with you. We all want peace. Let's live side by side respectfully. There was silence for a few seconds. Karen looked like she wanted to say more, but she couldn't find the words. Finally, she turned around and walked away slowly. The neighbors quietly watched her leave. After she disappeared around the corner, people began clapping for Rayan. He smiled, feeling proud but also humble. He did not want to make her feel embarrassed, but maybe this was the only way for her to understand. Later that evening, Rayan sat on his porch, looking at the sunset. He felt peaceful for the first time since moving in. The sky was painted in soft orange and pink shades. Mr. Green came by again and said, You handled that perfectly, son. You didn't fight, you just showed respect. That's the best way to win, Rayan smiled. I didn't want to win. I just wanted peace. Mr. Green nodded. Then you've already got it. Inside her house, Karen sat near the window. She could see the laughter and smiles coming from Rayan's porch. For the first time, she felt alone. Maybe she had gone too far. Maybe the new neighbor was not the enemy she thought he was. She looked at her reflection and whispered to herself, Maybe I was wrong. The night grew quiet. The stars appeared and the air turned cool. The neighborhood that had once felt divided now felt calm again. Rayan felt hopeful that this would be a fresh start for everyone. But deep down he knew that the story was not completely over. He had a feeling that Karen still had something to say, something that might change things even more. He didn't know it yet, but the next day would bring a surprise that would reveal the real reason behind Karen's behavior and the truth about the mysterious history of his non-HOA house. The next morning, the neighborhood was quieter than usual. The air was cool and the sun was hidden behind a thin layer of clouds. Birds sang softly in the distance and everything looked peaceful. Rayan stepped outside with a cup of tea, feeling calm after the gathering the previous day. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged in the neighborhood. The neighbors had accepted him, and the tension seemed to have faded away. But deep inside, he knew that something about Mrs. Karen still did not make sense. Her anger, her fear, and her obsession with rules felt too personal. There had to be a reason behind it. Rayan decided that he could not just ignore it. He wanted to understand the full truth. He believed that if he could find the real reason behind her actions, maybe they could finally have peace for good. Later that morning, he saw Karen's car parked near her house. She was sitting on the porch staring at the garden. Her face looked tired and sad. Rayan hesitated for a few seconds but then walked toward her slowly. When she noticed him, she looked surprised but did not speak. Rayan said in a calm voice, "Good morning, Mrs. Karen. I came to talk, not to argue." Karen sighed softly. "Why do you want to talk to me after everything that happened?" "I shouted at you and made a fool of myself." Rayan smiled politely. "Because I believe there is a reason for everything. I don't think you are a bad person. I just think something has hurt you deeply." For a moment, Karen said nothing. Then she looked away toward the small fountain near her porch. Her voice trembled as she said, "You wouldn't understand. This house, your house, it brings back memories that I've tried to forget." Rayan looked confused. "Memories? What do you mean?" Karen took a deep breath. "Before the HOA was formed, this whole area was different. People were careless. Houses looked messy, streets were untidy, and no one followed rules. My husband and I worked hard to build this community into something organized. We wanted safety and peace. But the house you live in used to belong to my closest friend, Maria. She refused to join the HOA when it started. We had an argument and we stopped speaking. A few months later, she moved away without saying goodbye. I always blame myself for that. When I saw you unlocking that same house, it felt like the past was repeating itself. Rayan listened quietly. The truth made sense now. Karen's anger was not really about him or the rules. It came from guilt and pain she had carried for years. She was not angry at him for living there. She was angry at herself for what had happened long ago. Rayan spoke softly. I didn't know that. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But maybe this is your chance to let go of the past. You did your best for the community and now it's time to forgive yourself. Karen wiped her eyes. It's not easy. Every time I look at that house, I remember how I lost a friend. Maybe that's why I treated you unfairly. You reminded me of her. Rayan nodded. I understand. But you can start again. People around here don't hate you. They just want kindness. Maybe you can rebuild your connection with everyone. Karen looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled weakly. You're a kind man, Rayan. I misjudged you. I thought you would destroy everything I built. But instead you helped people come together again. They sat in silence for a few minutes. The breeze blew softly through the trees. For the first time, Rayan saw a different side of her. She was not the loud and controlling woman everyone feared. She was just someone who had lost too much and had built walls to protect herself. After their talk, Rayan went back to his house feeling lighter. He felt proud that he had chosen understanding over anger. He wanted to show the rest of the neighbors that things had changed. That afternoon, he placed another small sign outside his house. It said, Community Tea Time, everyone welcome. When the neighbors saw it, they smiled and gathered again. This time, something unexpected happened. Karen came too. She walked slowly, carrying a tray of cookies. The crowd went silent for a second, unsure of what to say. But Rayan stepped forward and said warmly, Mrs. Karen, I'm glad you came. Karen smiled nervously. I wanted to apologize to everyone. I realize I was too strict and unfair. I wanted this place to be perfect, but I forgot that people matter more than rules. The neighbors clapped softly. Lisa walked over and said, We're glad you're here, Karen. No one wants to fight. We all just want peace. Karen nodded. Thank you. I'll try to do better. The mood became joyful. People laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed the evening. The air felt different now, full of warmth and friendship. Rayan looked around and felt grateful. What started as a misunderstanding had turned into a lesson about forgiveness and kindness. As the sun set, the sky turned golden. Karen sat beside Rayan and whispered, You know, Maria would have liked you. You remind me of her calm nature. Maybe this was meant to happen so I could finally let go of my regrets. Rayan smiled. Maybe it was. Life always gives us second chances. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Rayan sat on his porch and looked at the stars. He thought about how everything had changed in just a few days. He had arrived in a neighborhood filled with tension and left it filled with harmony. The sound of laughter still echoed faintly from nearby houses. At the same time, Karen stood by her window, looking toward Rayan's home. For the first time in many years, she felt peace in her heart. She decided that the next day she would visit Maria's old town and try to find her. Maybe they could reconnect. Maybe it was not too late to fix old mistakes. Weeks passed and the neighborhood became even friendlier. Karen was no longer feared. She smiled at everyone, helped new families settle in, and even organized small get-togethers with Rayan's help. The once divided community had turned into a close and happy place. One morning, Rayan received a letter in his mailbox. It was from Karen. She had gone to visit Maria and found her. The letter said they had forgiven each other and promised to stay in touch. Karen thanked Rayan for opening her heart again. She wrote, Your kindness gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. Peace. Rayan folded the letter carefully and smiled. He placed it on his table beside a small plant, thinking how one small act of understanding had changed so many lives. That evening, the golden light of sunset covered the houses. Children played on the sidewalks, families laughed on their porches, and the air was filled with calmness. The HOA leader and the man from the non-HOA house had become friends, proving that rules and fences could never be stronger than kindness and understanding. The story of the non-HOA home became a gentle reminder for everyone in the area that respect and compassion can heal even the deepest divides.